Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome back to Skills 360. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today we're going to talk about staying positive. When you look ahead at the year to come, what do you see? Do you see great things for yourself, for your business, or for your career? Or do you see doom and gloom, trouble in the workplace, and a global economic mess? Well, I hope you focus on all the positives, even if the negatives exist. And what I want to do is to help you focus on these good things, because positive thinking can help us get where we want to go. So what do I mean by positive thinking? Let me start by saying that it's not the same as optimism. Being optimistic means believing that everything is going to work out great. But positive thinking is more than that. It's a mindset, or a way of looking at the world and what you do. It's a belief in possibility, solutions to problems, and the big picture. The opposite of positive thinking is, of course, negative thinking. Negative thinking means focusing on problems, obstacles, and difficulties, and most of those problems are external. We blame coworkers, the economy, our boss, the competition, a lack of money. And what's the result of all this? Limits. We limit ourselves and what we do. We think we can't do things before we even try. And that's no way to succeed. Okay, so how do we think positively? First of all, we need to look at problems, mistakes, and failures as normal. Imagine you bomb a big job interview. A negative thinker will be bummed out by the fact that he didn't get the job. A positive thinker will learn from the experience. He will analyze what he did and figure out how to do it better next time. And he'll also think about what he did well and try to repeat or improve on those successes. This means focusing on the big picture. That one job interview is not the end of the world. It's a bump along your career path. There are many more opportunities out there, and probably many better jobs. One trick to positive thinking is to imagine how you'll think back on things that are happening now. You know from experience that the passing of time brings a fresh perspective. There are bad things that happened last year that you can probably laugh about now. You understand what was a big deal and what was not. Try to do that in the present. Positive thinking often means separating the past and the future. A negative thinker will focus on the past, especially past failures. But the past can't be changed. It's done and dusted. The future, however, is yet to be written. And that's where the positive thinker will focus his attention. How do I do this better next time? Learning is important, and we can see the power of positive thinking when it comes to problem solving. The negative thinker looks at problems as endpoints. He says, "We can't do this." The positive thinker understands that there is a solution to every problem. He says, "How can we solve this?" And if you believe there is a way to do something, then there is a way to do something. Positive thinking is a mental habit. It takes practice. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves to focus on the future and on possibility. Sometimes it's hard to learn from our failures or see the big picture. But if you can do it, there are some great payoffs. You'll have greater confidence and a better chance of success. And there's a lot of research to show that positive thinking actually makes us healthier. And what's the net result of these effects? Satisfaction, happiness, and a better quality of life. And who doesn't want that? We've been talking about how to think positively, but there's another important technique here, and that is the way we act and maintain a positive attitude toward other people. Tune in next time to hear all about that. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to Skills 360. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. In today's lesson, we're going to build on last week's ideas and look at how you can implement a positive attitude at work. Think about this for a second. What kind of people do you like to be around? People who moan and complain and talk about how lousy their life is? Or people who have a sense of humor, who smile, who say, "Great to see you," and who can find solutions to problems? Well, I'm going to venture a guess here and say that you prefer to spend your time with the second type of person. Why? Because they make you feel good. In our last episode, we talked about positive thinking. Today, it's all about maintaining a positive attitude toward others. And we've just identified one great reason to do this. It makes people feel good. And if you can do that, then customers will want to do business with you, colleagues will want to work with you, and bosses will want to see you do well. That's certainly a recipe for success. But as you know, it's not always easy. Staying positive can be very difficult, especially when other people are negative. Sometimes we're faced with mistrust, jealousy, fear, and blame. Sometimes the people we work with seem determined to drag us down. And sometimes things don't go our way. We make mistakes. We don't meet deadlines. We encounter huge problems. At times like these, it can be pretty hard to smile and say, "What a great day!" But it's important to try. Others may complain, but we should refuse to participate. We can still be empathetic. We can still say, "I'm so sorry you feel that way." But we should try not to give in to negativity and say, "Yeah, life really does suck." So, what does having a positive attitude involve? Let's start simple. With a smile. Smiling is one of the only universal human expressions. It means the same thing and has the same power in almost every culture. Smile at others, and they'll smile back. It doesn't matter what business you're in or what situation. Whether you're a computer tech helping a company with its servers or an executive walking into a high-powered interview, just smile. Another part of a positive attitude is courtesy. Yes, that means saying please and thank you and how do you do. But it's more than that. Hold the door open for people. Shake their hands. Buy them a coffee. These simple things can do a lot to make people feel good. And here's a tip It's pretty easy to surprise people by showing courtesy in email and other online communication. Technology has killed a lot of common courtesy, so stand out by showing you haven't forgotten how to be polite. Now, it's not just about how you say things, it's also about what you say. Think about the last few people you talked with at work. What did you talk about? What did you say? Did you talk about problems and failures? Or did you talk about successes? It can be pretty easy to focus on what is going wrong and on what needs to be improved. But we can't forget to say good things. That means complimenting and praising people. Like this: "Hey Dave, I think you did a great job on that report." Or, "Susan, I'm really glad you're working on this project with us." Most of us could do with more of this positive talk in our lives. Success is addictive, and reminding people of their successes is motivating. Of course, balance is important. You don't want to constantly gush with praise. You don't want to say, "Things are great," when they really aren't, because you don't want people to think you're a Pollyanna. A Pollyanna is someone who only sees good things and thinks everything is wonderful even when it isn't. That's not realistic, because problems happen. There are obstacles that we need to face. Having a positive attitude doesn't mean ignoring these problems. It means facing them creatively and looking for solutions. Imagine you're working late with your team and the server goes down. What do? Do you say to everyone, "Crap, now we'll never get this done"? Or do you say, "Let's get tech support in here right away so we can fix this thing"? In other words, do you see limits or do you look for solutions? And which type of person do you want leading the team? Right. So let's review what we've talked about here. First, a positive attitude makes people feel good and want to work with you. Second, it's especially important to stay positive when faced with negativity. Next, being positive can be as simple as smiling and being courteous. It also means remembering to praise people and talk about the good things, rather than criticizing and finding fault. But it doesn't mean turning a blind eye to problems. Instead, it means looking for solutions and possibility. And if you can do these things, you'll be both happier and more successful. I guarantee it. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There, you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to look at ways to deal with criticism. Criticism is something we all have to face. During a performance review, we have to listen as our boss criticizes our work. In meetings, people criticize our ideas. And every day, we might hear people criticize us in the staff room and over the phone. We might also hear praise in these situations, but more often than not, it's the sting of criticism that lingers. And let's face it, hearing people criticize our work or criticize us is never really easy. So, how can we face criticism with the right attitude and approach? Well, start by thinking about the situation and the source. The situation might be formal, like your performance review or another evaluation process. Or it might be informal, like in the staff room. In formal situations, it's often a supervisor or superior who is criticizing. In informal situations, well, it could be anyone. It's important to think of the situation and the source, because that might help determine whether the criticism is constructive or destructive. Although some people use the word criticism to refer to unfair, negative comments, a lot of criticism is actually constructive. I mean, it's intended to help us do something better, to improve, to change in positive ways. Of course, there's always destructive criticism, which has different motivations. Destructive criticism is sometimes personal, intended to hurt people rather than help people. You need to be able to handle both. Now, we've talked about formal and informal situations and constructive and destructive criticism. You can probably see the difference here. Constructive criticism in formal situations is just a part of working life. More than that, it's necessary, and your job probably requires you to deliver this type of criticism too. So you should look at this criticism as an opportunity, as hard as that might be to do. Okay, but what about destructive criticism, especially in informal situations? I mean, what do you do when Dave, your snarky colleague, says, "Geez, you really messed up that presentation, didn't you?" Well, your attitude and approach shouldn't actually be too different, even though you want to tell Dave exactly what you think of him. You see, the best thing to do first, no matter what the situation, is to ask a question. If your boss says you need to take more initiative, you can ask, "Can you give me an example of a situation where I should have taken more initiative?" And if Dave tells you you're terrible with PowerPoint, you can ask, "What do you think I need to do better, Dave?" By asking questions, you show that you take constructive criticism seriously, and you can challenge destructive criticism. Either way, you are maintaining a professional attitude. The alternative to maintaining a professional attitude is getting defensive, angry, or resentful. In other words, responding emotionally. Nothing good will come of that type of reaction, regardless of the situation. In fact, studies have shown a connection between emotional responses to criticism and a lack of confidence or self-esteem. It's true, if you get defensive, you show people that you're fragile, and that's not one of the qualities that leads to success. Maintaining a professional attitude also means not shooting back with your own criticism against the other person. So that means we shouldn't say, "Oh yeah, Dave? Well, your writing skills leave a lot to be desired." That kind of response is a one-way ticket to a nasty argument. Of course, you probably wouldn't be tempted to respond critically in a formal situation when you're listening to your boss review your performance. Still, in these formal situations, criticism can still be tough. And some people are not very skilled at giving criticism gently. We've all had bosses who sound harsh or rude without even knowing it. But we still need to separate the how from the what. That is, it's not about tone of voice or word choice. It's about the work, the performance, and the outcomes. That's the secret right there. Think about outcomes. Don't take things too personally. Instead, leave your ego out of it and consider your work objectively. Think about what you do and how you might do it better. If you can focus on improvement and maintain a professional attitude, you'll shine in the face of criticism. no matter what the situation. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There, you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to look at some more ways of dealing with criticism. Unless you're perfect, you have room to improve. That doesn't sound like a difficult idea to accept, but what is difficult is when other people point it out to us. They might tell us that we've done something wrong, or done something poorly, or shouldn't have done something at all. Some people might tell us in a polite and professional manner, just as a wise and diplomatic boss might. But others might just sound harsh or rude. So, what should we do in the face of criticism? Well, today I want to focus on validity. That is, on whether the criticism is valid, justified, or reasonable. If it is, then we should treat it as helpful and constructive. And if it's not, then we might need a different approach. All right, but first, how do we know if the criticism is valid or not? How do we know it is correct and reasonable? Well, sometimes you know it's valid if you've heard it before. So, the first time you hear that you don't sound polite enough on the phone, you might just think it's one person's opinion. But if you hear it numerous times, then you'd better watch your language. Also, valid criticism is often tied to specifics. That is, the person says exactly what is wrong, not just generally that something is wrong. So, you work too slowly is questionable, but you need to pick up the pace because you've delivered the past 3 reports late is specific. Of course, as I mentioned in the last lesson, you can ask questions to encourage the person criticizing you to be more specific, and that will help you figure out if the criticism is valid. But sometimes criticism isn't valid. Sometimes it's unfair. Sometimes it's a grumpy colleague who thinks he will look better if you look bad. That kind of criticism is sometimes delivered emotionally rather than calmly and reasonably. Sometimes invalid criticism lacks specifics. And sometimes it just comes naturally from people who don't play well with others. Again, asking questions can help you figure it out. If the person can't give you specifics, then maybe the criticism isn't so valid after all. And if you're really not sure, you can always try asking for a second opinion. So when Mike tells you that you're a terrible negotiator, go ask Larry whether it's true or not. So why think about whether criticism is valid? Well, first of all, because valid criticism is an opportunity to improve. We all need good feedback to learn how we can change or adapt what we do in order to get better. Don't be afraid of that feedback. Embrace it. It will help you grow. In other words, you need to learn to say, "You're right," even when it hurts. In fact, Sometimes we get most upset when someone criticizes us for something that we know is perfectly true and that we already feel bad about. But if the criticism is valid, then take it. And if that means you need to swallow your pride, then swallow it. In some cases, criticism isn't completely valid, but only partly. Surely you know someone who adds never or always to every piece of criticism, as in, you never pick up your stuff in the staff room, or you always change my settings when you use my computer. Well, you should still acknowledge the valid part, even if it's not completely true, or it's exaggerated. So you might say, well, it's true that I changed some settings last week, and for that, I'm sorry. But what about that criticism that is not valid? What about the truly unfair comments that we have to put up with? You've got a few options. First, you can ignore it. And if the source is someone who everyone knows is cantankerous, it probably won't matter. You can also challenge the criticism. Once again, this can mean asking questions. Invalid criticism will fall apart at the seams under scrutiny. Thirdly, if the criticism isn't fair because of a misunderstanding, then clear it up professionally, without making excuses or scapegoating. So if it wasn't you who changed the computer settings, then don't say, "No way, man, it was Rick." Instead, try, "I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken. I haven't used your computer. It may have been someone else." And finally, you can deal with the personal issue behind the criticism. I mean, if someone is criticizing you unfairly because they don't like you or they're competing with you, then it may not be enough to deal with each point of criticism. You need to solve the underlying problem. So remember, your approach to valid and invalid criticism may be different, but in any case, you need to start out with an open mind. If you're confident in yourself and your efforts, then you shouldn't feel attacked when you're criticized. Keep your chin up and learn from what others have to say. After all, you're not perfect, right? That's all for today. So long, and see you again soon.